with recording, coach. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ali Al Ali. I am the president of the Actuarial Club at KFUBM. Today, we have a very special guest. I think he is an aspiring actuary for many of us. And on behalf of the club's member, I would like to welcome you, Coach Dave. Personally speaking, I think my actuarial journey has become much more easier using coaching actuaries, especially when I'm preparing for my exams. And that might be funny, but when I heard your voice, I know that there is an exam on the way and I should be prepared for that. The coach is going to present for about half an hour. He is going to share his thoughts and experience with us and regarding the actuarial profession and the exams. Then he will have an open discussion where the audience can ask and interact. Once again, I encourage our colleagues to open their camera and to use their mics if they have any question. The mic is yours now, Coach Dave.
Well, thank you, Ali. That was, it really is a pleasure and an honor for me to be speaking with you. I'm totally amazed that, people in Saudi Arabia have even heard of me or us. And so I feel humbled that you would ask me to speak with you and your club. And I'll admit, I've never been to Saudi Arabia. I certainly would enjoy the visit. It sounds like a very neat culture. But I'm just learning a little bit about your country and so forth. So, if I say something that sounds kind of foolish, please pardon me. It's probably just an American who doesn't really understand all of the nuances of Saudi Arabia. But I'm just going to do my best. So as Ali mentioned, we're going to have time for questions at the end. And the main goal for me to be here is to answer your question. So I'm going to spend, maybe 30 minutes talking, but please don't be shy about asking questions. There won't be any bad questions. All questions will be good. So if you happen to think of some, go ahead and write them down, and then we'll have plenty of time at the end to answer those questions. So with that, one more thing is I'm connected on LinkedIn. And so I know I've connected with a couple of you already, but feel free to connect with me afterwards, because you might come up with a question later that you didn't think of. And I do try to answer those questions on LinkedIn. And so you're welcome to ask me questions on LinkedIn if you want as well. So with that, I will start. Just a quick background on myself. I started my company in 1995. I guess that means I'm kind of old. I started taking exams in 1986. And so my company's been around for since 85. So I guess that makes it about 95. So that makes about 26 years. So I've been fortunate enough to have 26 years of working with people I really enjoy. Our focus over the first 20 years was a combination of education and consulting. But the last 6 years, it's been pretty much focused just on education. And we got out of the consulting business about 6 years ago. Okay, with that, I'm going to share my screen. And then I'm going to try to, then I'm going to go through my presentation. So if you bear with me a moment.
Yeah, I will make you a co-host now. Yeah, I think you can share your screen now.
Okay. Yep, it looks like I can. Okay. And now I will, oops. And now I'll go ahead and get started. Okay. Can you see that big circle there?
Yeah, it's shown now. Yes.
All right. And is everyone, hopefully everyone's included in the meeting. So, all right. So I'm going to talk primarily about the goal today is talking about the importance of the exams. And I'm also going to give some tips along the way. And at the end, I'm going to give one thought as to why it's worth going through all the process and all the hard work of passing the exams. And so I want to kind of leave with that. I'm going to hopefully have some things here for everybody because there's probably some people here that are just beginning their actuarial journey. So there'll be some things for beginners that maybe is not new information for everyone. And I do see that someone's asking to be admitted. So I'm going to see if I can admit that person. I'm not sure if I can or not.
We will admit them, so you don't have
All right.
to
I
do
won't need
that.
to do that. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Thank you. So hopefully there's something for everybody. But some of this will be review if you've already taken a couple of exams. All right. So I can't emphasize enough how important passing exams is to becoming an actuary. And that's something that I know I've seen over 30 years in real life, how important that is. And I'll share a few of those experiences today. So in short, passing exams really is the key that will unlock your future. Again, I'm speaking primarily from my experience in the United States. I think that that's true worldwide. And I guess that means probably that's true in Saudi Arabia, but I'm a member of the Society of Actuaries, and I'm pretty confident that wherever you go, if you've passed Society of Actuary exams, that will be an extremely important part, not only in getting your first job, but earning respect from your colleagues. When I first started my job right out of college, I knew almost nothing about insurance. I had no exams passed. I got a degree in college from math education as a teacher. And so I really knew nothing. And yet when I started, I was impressed with how many of my coworkers really respected me, even though I was pretty ignorant about insurance, but they respected me because I was an actuary going through exams. And so I was amazed as to how much other people really recognized actuaries as a very respectful profession. I think that I would encourage people to get at least 2 exams passed before you get your first job. 3 exams is better. And so I would say that would be a minimum to get you started, at least in the places that I've heard as far as getting your first job. Okay, now in the US, we have 2 exam systems, and I mentioned one is the Society of Actuaries, and you're probably familiar with that. And if you go to the website, pathways.soa.org, they outline 3 steps to getting your FSA. And so our company is primarily focused on getting you to the ASA level, the associate. But then after that, then you can become a CERA and then eventually a fellow. And so if you're not familiar with these paths, I would suggest writing down that website, pathways.soa.org. And then that will give you more information that you can look at the details. Then the other option is the Casualty Actuarial Society. So the casualty is for like property insurance, like your home, your auto, other types of property. They're primarily a U.S. focused company. I know that they do work internationally, but they're not as international as the Society of Actuaries. And the first 2 exams for the casualty are the same as the SOA. And so if you pass those first 2 exams, you could go down either of those routes. I'm not sure exactly how much of an option that is for you, but I at least wanted to mention it because I know there's many countries that really consider the CS as a very highly respected credential.
Yeah, I want to add that, yes, in our country, they usually recommend to pass 1 or 2 exams at least, as you say.
Okay. Yep. So 1 or 2 or 3. So, I think if you can target 2 exams, that would be a good starting goal as a target before you try to find your first job. Okay, well, good. I'm going to talk a little bit about preparing for the exams, but as I'm talking about preparing for the exams, really, I'm still talking about how important the exams are. But I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail because I think in order to be really helpful for you, I need to get into some of the details about what the exams are like. If you've taken the exams, you probably know that the exams are not like what you would normally see at a university, at least not at a university in the United States. The exams are quite different. They're quite different than just reading a textbook. And so you really need to take practice tests in order to get a feel for what types of questions they ask on the exam. So there's different ways to prepare for the exam. And the first part you need to do is you need to learn the material. That's obvious. And I kind of look at there's two main ways of learning how to study. And, I really learned how to study efficiently, not when I was in school, but when I started taking exams, because I had to become efficient. And so as I went through the exams, I learned a few things about how I best studied. And one thing is you can try to learn by reading the material. That could be maybe reading a paper copy of something, or reading something that's online. But either way, some people learn best by reading. And that's always a good option. And that may be an option for you. Another option then is to watch videos. Some people work better by seeing things move and animated, and then hearing the voice. And so that's additional ways of learning. And so that's another way to learn that some people prefer. And then, of course, you could do both, reading and watching. So one of these is not better than the other, but it's good to learn which way works better for you. And so one of the first things you want to figure out is how do you best learn as you study for the exams? And then, of course, use that type of strategy accordingly. That took me a while to kind of figure out. The bottom line, though, is what I really want to recommend is that I think in order to be successful with the exams, you really need to, what I talk about is pursue active learning. And that means you're not just sitting, and if you're reading or watching, you're not just sitting, reading and watching, but you're always working out problems. You're asking questions, you're doing what if, and you're thinking about the material, and you're not just passively absorbing the material. I think that that's a really slow way and inefficient way of preparing for the exams. And you might learn a lot of information, but then when it comes time to take the test, I don't think you'll be nearly as successful than if you take a very active role in passing. That's just my opinion. There's people in your club that have passed exams. So, I would encourage you to talk to them. How did they best study? And they could really give you some tips on how they best studied. That's what I did when I was first taking exams. I would talk to friends of mine and ask them questions about what worked for them. And so, don't be shy about asking other people who are more experienced what has worked for them, and see if you can learn some things from them. So that's kind of my tip for different ways of learning the material better. But it's not just a matter of learning the material that you need to do in order to prepare for the exams. You need to also practice the material. And the way I look at it is, if you think about I'm assuming you know how to drive a car, how you learn how to drive a car, you probably maybe read a little about driving a car, but the way you really learned how to drive a car was actually getting in the car and driving. And so that's how you learn how to drive the car. And passing the exams, I think, is the same way. You can read about it or watch videos, but the only way to really prepare for learning how to pass the exams is to actually take practice problems and to take practice exams. And so we recommend you spend about 30 days before the exams where you're not really learning. You've already read through all the material, but now you're just focusing on practicing. And I think that that's really important in order to have that optimal chance of passing the exam. Again, you can talk to your colleagues about that to get their experience. You don't need to take my word for it. And so the exam scores are between 0 and 10. You probably know 6 is passing. So, anything 6 and above is good. I've got every number between 6 and 10, and all of them were passing scores. And so don't feel like 6 is not a good score just because someone else gets a 7. But you want to target something 6 and better. And some of you who have used our material know that we've got one way that we help in that practicing strategy because it's important to try to mimic the real exam as much as you can. So what we did was we created a tool that some of you are familiar with. It's just called Adapt. And this is just an example. But what we created was what's called this earn level. And this earn level also goes from 0 to 10. And the idea is as you take more practice tests, then your earn level goes up and down, hopefully up, and the higher, the better. And as you can see from the graph here, if you take your exam and your earn level is less than 3, then those people have about 1/3 of a chance of passing. But if you can increase it to a 3 to 5, then your chances increase to about 50%. And then 5 to 7, you jump way up to an 81%. And then if you happen to get an earn level that's at least 7, then you've got like a 91% chance of passing. So that's just a tool that we've used. There's other ways of preparing for practicing. But I think the idea, as you can see, is however you measure yourself, you want to try to have something where you can get better and better at, so that when it comes time to exam, you can get at least a score of a 6. And so that's my main emphasis for practice. So one of the things that is really important for the exam is it's not just practicing. One of the ways the exams are different than I think a lot of other types of classes and textbooks is that there's not a lot of emphasis on just memorizing material. You will have to have some things memorized, but the number one thing that I want you to remember from today is that the exams are really about basic principles. So what do I mean by basic principles? Well, I'm from Des Moines, Iowa, so you can see a map there. There's Des Moines, Iowa, right in the middle of Iowa. And if I was going to tell you how to drive from Des Moines to Washington, D.C., I could give you a step-by-step instructions of all the turns that you need to make in order to arrive at Washington, D.C. And then you could take that instructions and maybe even memorize them and then go on your journey, and you would arrive safely at Washington, D.C. Now, that would work if that's your goal. But another option is what I would call a basic principle strategy. And that is I would teach you how to read the signs, what the different road signs mean. I would give you a map so you can show you how to read the map, maybe give you a GPS system, teach you how to use the GPS system. And so then you can use those tools, those basic principles to navigate to go from Des Moines to Washington. Now, you may not get there quite as efficient as if you had everything memorized. But of course, the benefit is if you need to go to Philadelphia, you know how to get to Philadelphia because you've learned the basic principles. And you didn't just memorize the steps to get to Washington, D.C. And I think the number one problem students have in preparing for the exams is they will see how problems done and they will memorize these steps. But then when another problem comes out that's different, they won't know how to answer that question. And so they'll go and memorize new steps. And they spend a lot of time memorizing steps when they could take a step back and understand basic principles. And it takes more work to understand basic principles in the short term, but in the long term, you will save a lot of time and you'll be more successful. And so it's a really fundamental strategy in order to prepare for the exams. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what that basic principle means for the different exams. And so let's just take a look at some of the exams. One of the things is you need to remember that each question for the multiple choice is like 5 to 6 minutes per problem. And so you want to make sure you don't spend more than 6 minutes on a problem. Maybe 1 or 2, you could go 8 minutes, but you want to condition yourself not to spend more than 6 minutes on a problem. And that can be difficult because you may know how to answer the question and it's 6 minutes, but you haven't answered it yet. But you have to decide, okay, I'm going to leave this and come back later if I have time. But you need to discipline yourself not to spend more than 6 minutes per problem. And with that, you need to remember that all multiple choice problems are worth the same. And so if you spend 15, 20 minutes answering a problem, a difficult problem, you get 1 credit, but you're also probably not going to have time to answer 3 easy questions that would be worth 3 points. And so when you go through the exam, try to answer the easy questions first because they're worth just as much credit as the difficult questions. And that can be difficult because I know we like to answer those harder questions because they're a challenge for us and we know we can do it. But first, make sure you answer the easy questions first. All right. And then, like I said before, you want to practice under exam conditions. So if it's a 3-hour exam, take a 3-hour exam, have no breaks, and don't use your study notes or your formulas. Have everything just like it is in a real exam, and then practice that way. So I think that that's important to do 3 or 4 times at least before your exam. All right, so now I want to talk briefly about the importance of each exam and maybe give you a tip or 2 about the exams. So the first exam is exam P, probability, and some of you have already passed that. But our future is uncertain. We know that. We don't know what tomorrow is going to hold. We don't know what 10 years is going to be like. What probability allows actuaries to do is to look into the future and make sense of it. And they do that with probabilities. And so that is foundation to all of what it is to being an actuary. And so when you learn P, you're going to use what you learn in P throughout the rest of your career. And so it's important that you understand, again, the basic principles of P. And then if you move to FM, some people take FM first and then P, and other people take P first, then FM. But FM is financial mathematics. For me personally, that exam was the most important exam in my career and actually in my personal life. I've used interest theory a lot in my personal life. And in short, what you learn how to do in FM is you learn how to move money forward in time and backward in time. And that is a wonderful skill that you will use throughout your career because actuaries are always moving money forward in time and backward in time. And once you learn that skill, then you can apply it to all kinds of different situations. So exam FM, you need to do that for working with annuities, for loans, for a bond, for mortgages, for stocks, for all these different things, but the math is the same. And so this is another example. If you can learn the basic principle of moving money forward and backward, then you can use it for any application. It doesn't matter what the application is. And so that's where it's important to understand the basic principles and not just memorize, well, what do I need to do for a loan? And then memorize another thing. Well, how do I use this for a bond? And then memorize another thing. How do I use this for an annuity? It's the same math for all of them. And you need to understand the basic principles. So that's important for FM. IFM is the next exam, and that's investment in financial markets. And it takes information from probability and interest theory to basically create and price derivatives. And derivatives are an important part of actuaries because derivatives are important by themselves, but then insurance, really all insurance is a bunch of derivatives that are packaged together into one product. And so when you learn about derivatives, what you're really learning about is insurance. And so you'll learn these concepts in corporate finance and portfolio theory. And, corporate finance is really how does insurance companies keep score? I really like sports. And in sports, you always need to know, well, what is the score in order to win? And most of the times, it's pretty easy. Usually the most points or the most goals, they win. Now in business, corporate finance is way more complicated, but all it is a matter of keeping score. And, it's about understanding, profit, of course, is important, but you need to understand what is profit. And profit is a very complicated concept to understand, and actuaries know profit better than anybody else. And you're going to learn a lot about that in corporate finance. You'll learn how to keep score, and you need to know how to keep score in order to win in business. And the next exam I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to talk about 4, is LTAM. And so I heard someone talk about STM. So LTM is similar, except it's long-term actual mathematics. This exam is only provided by the SOA, where the first 3 are both the SOA and the CAS. This is actually my favorite exam. I think this is the most important exam and the most difficult exam for people to pass in order to become an actuary. And, actuaries live in the future. We live in the long term, and this exam helps you to work and to build models that will be able to answer questions for the long term. You will use what you learn in P, and you'll use what you learn in FM in LTAM to build those models. But once you learn how to build those models in LTM, you will be able to do amazing things in any type of business situation, because all businesses deal with risk. And I think LTAM at the core really helps you understand how to manage risk. It helps you to understand really what profit is and how to work with contingencies, how to consider things that could go many different ways, and how to build a model that measures all that. And so that LTM exam is extremely powerful. And it's a difficult exam. It's a challenging exam, but it is really, it's wonderful. And I think you'll find that the topics in there are fascinating. So through all those exams, you really just need to understand basic principles. Don't focus on memorizing things. You will memorize some things as you go along, but you need to understand the basic principles of the exam. All right. Well, that was a lot to go through. I'm going to take a break here real quick. That's kind of the nuts and bolts about why exams are important and how to get through them in 20 minutes or less. Obviously, I could talk 2 hours about this, or 20 hours, because there's plenty to talk about, but I try to give you kind of the short version of it. And then I want to kind of finish it up with answering the question of why do all this? Why go to all this work? And one thing is that I think that the actuaries, becoming actuaries, is about understanding the promise. And one promise is you're going to spend a lot of time learning basic principles. And what I think part of that promise is that once you understand those basic principles, that we promise that those principles will apply to your life, to your career, and that they will be useful principles. They will not just be theoretical principles, but they'll be principles that you can use to solve real life problems. And so as you learn those principles, knowing that these are really foundational and important principles that you're learning, and you don't want to forget the principles. You can forget formulas, you can forget a lot of things, but you don't forget the principles. It's just kind of like when you learn how to drive a car. Once you learn how to drive, you don't forget how to drive a car. You may forget how to get to, Washington, D.C., but you don't forget how to drive that car. And so that's what the part of that promise is you're going to learn a skill that's going to be worth the effort. And then the second thing, as far as the promise, is we don't get to work with the customers very often, the people that actually buy the insurance policies. But if you take a moment and think about the customers, they're coming to an insurance company because they know that things in their life that can happen, bad things like a tornado or a hurricane, or a fire or a death, all of these things that could happen in their life, they don't know if and when those things are going to happen, but they're going to count on the insurance company to be there when they need it. And so the insurance company has to provide for their customers in that time of need, to help their families in time of need. And it's not just a matter of talking about the future, and it's not just a matter of making a promise of what they'll do in the future.
So weird.
But it's what actuaries do, though, is that they guarantee those promises. And so they guarantee those promises in the form of a contract. And that contract gives the customer the confidence that they will fulfill those promises. And so as actuaries, we are in a very noble profession because we are making promises to families to help them in time of need. And we're not only making these promises, but we're willing to keep those promises. And that's difficult because the future is uncertain. And that's why we go through all the exams, is to figure out how to plan for an uncertain future. It does take a lot of work to pass the actual exams, and I know you know that, but I do want to remind you, though, it is worth the effort to pass the exams. And with that, I think we're at 30 minutes, and I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I will open it up for questions now for anyone who wants to ask any questions. I'd be more than happy to answer those questions.
Thank you, Coach. That was an informative and a good presentation for us. Once again, we encourage our members to use their cameras. Feel free to ask if you have any question. You can open your mic and ask the coach directly.
Coach Dave, I have a question here.
Sure.
I noticed that coaching actuaries start to put new products like from other societies exams. So I saw that you started to release a product for exam MAS1 from CAS.
Yes, right? Correct.
Yeah. Some of the students here or people here are interested to go into CAS. So our coaching actuaries in the future will provide more exams from CAS?
That's a very good question. As we know, the future is uncertain, right? But with that, as actuaries, we can still look in the future. And our hope is to also provide materials for MAS 2. And so that's the exam most students would take after MAS 1 would be MAS 2. Now, that's not going to happen anytime in the next 6 months. But it is something that we're hoping will happen in maybe in the next 2 years, 1 to 2 years, is when we will be able to provide materials for MAS 2. And we're also in the process right now of developing materials for the predictive analytics for the Society of Actuaries. So that is not released yet, but it is a work in progress that we're working on. And so that will probably be available before MAS 2. Once we get predictive analytics complete, then our next big target will probably be MAS 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's a good question.
Yep, thank you.
What
about the audience? Anyone have any questions?
You can write your question in the comment section, by the way, so we can ask the coach. Yeah. Go ahead, Hamid.
Can you, Mr. Dave, explain how does ADAPT is working briefly? Does the skills in the ADAPT represent the real skills in the actual exam?
Well, we do the best we can. We've spent a lot of time research and developing this. We've invested maybe 10 years on developing this technology. So we've certainly put a lot of time and effort into it, and a lot of smart people have put time and effort into it. But with that, we do not have any information about the actual exam than what you would have. We can only use public information that the Society of Actuaries and the Casual Actuaries Societies provides on their website. And so we can't, predict what's going to be on the exam really any better than anybody else can, because we're using the same information. Now, maybe we have a little bit of advantage because we've got a lot of people and we're spending 10 years doing it. And so we have, a lot of time, but we don't know anything more that the SOA is providing than what is on the website. So, I think that we do a good job for as much information as we're given, but we don't want to give the impression that we have any inside information, because we don't.
Thank you very much.
By the way, Coach, I feel that you always emphasize that you only use the public information only. So is there many people asking you about this, if you have any private information?
So you're asking do I have a lot of people that are asking me about this question?
Yeah, because I heard a podcast that was a year ago with you on YouTube, and you emphasize on that also, that you only use public information. Yeah, you don't have any private information.
Yeah, actually, the Stuart Klugman, who is kind of one of the lead people at the Society of Actuaries, is someone I know real well. And I've talked to him and I've asked him, I said, is there anything that you want me to tell students? And the one thing he has told me is that to let people know that our company and other competitors do not have any inside information, because he said that they will get a lot of questions from candidates and they will talk about like the material they got at Coaching Actuaries, and they're wondering about how that compares to the exam. And the Society of Actuaries, they have no responsibility for what we do, and they want people to know that they're not giving us any extra information. So that's kind of been a request that Stuart Klugman has given me, to remind people that we don't have any extra information. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think you answered my question. Yes.
Okay.
If you allow me, I have a question.
Sure.
First, thank you for the great presentation, Coach Dave.
You're welcome. Glad to do it.
I think most of our discussion today was about the associateship exams. And I'm a kind of person who likes to plan for the long term.
Very good.
My question is about the fellowship exams.
Okay.
For me, I did not decide yet which fellowship path I would take. And my question is, what are the things that I should take into consideration when I'm choosing the fellowship path?
That's an excellent question. First of all, let's see, I went through the life track. And so I was a life pricing actuary, and that made it pretty easy for me, based upon the job I had, to do that. If I was going to do it over again, I might be interested in doing the investment track, because I think the investment track really teaches some good concepts that I think are useful for more, many actuaries. And so that's one of the advantages, I think. But the main thing is, if you have a job, you'll probably want to choose the track that is most consistent with what that job needs are. But you also want to think about, what are you interested in? And, for me personally, I've always been interested in investments. And so that would be probably why I might consider doing that again. So you want to look at, what is your, if you have a job, what does your employer prefer? And what are you really interested in? Those are the two things I would probably think about most. President, sometimes I don't know all the details about what they do.
Yeah.
But we would be more than happy to visit with you and come up with an arrangement that suits your needs.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if the members have any question. You can write your
Coach,
question on.
I have a question, please.
Yeah.
What is the average duration that should take to be an associate?
Now that's a good question. When so if we're talking about the SOA, you've got the exams and then you have your modules, and it really varies. Depends upon how much time you've got to devote to it. I would say somewhere between 4, 5, 6, 7 years are good numbers to think about, somewhere in that range. And what I would suggest doing is to come up with what you think is a good schedule for you, because that's what I did when I went through the exams. I had set 4 years for the ASA and then 7 years, 4 years for the ASA and 4 more years for the FSA. So 8 years total to become an FSA. And the value that gave me was when things didn't go well, like maybe I couldn't take an exam or I failed an exam, I was still able to reach my goal. Because it can be discouraging if you don't pass an exam, but if you have room in your target for not passing, you don't get too discouraged by that event, and you just remind yourself, it's like, okay, I want to focus on the long term, that 8-year plan or that 4-year plan, and I need to now get back and pass it the next time, and not worry that I didn't pass it the previous time. So I think there's value in coming up with that time period with whatever works for you, and think about how much time you want to devote to it, so that you have margin for error.
Coach Dave, there is a question here from our audience.
Okay.
So I will repeat what they say.
Okay.
I would like to thanking Fahad Club for inviting Coach Dave, and I will thank Coach Dave for helping making them much more easier.
Mhm.
I am wondering if it's possible to have a real world projects that use the knowledge we learned.
If there's like I know I used the information from the exams in my consulting career and when I was working at insurance companies, especially information from exam FM and exam LTAM, because I built and priced insurance products, and you need to know a lot of the information that's in those 2 exams in order to price insurance products. It doesn't tell you everything you need to know, but it does give you your first foundation, the kind of the key components of it. And then it does get a lot more complicated when you work on it in real life, but you learn that the extra complicated parts on the job. And this comes back to the basic principles I talked about. If you learn the basic principles of the exam, then you're able to adapt and solve problems that are more complicated in the real world when you do that. And so, I think that, exam FM and exam LTM are exams where you will use in real life. Like I say, I could give several examples of that, but those are examples that I have experienced.
Again, for our audience, please feel free to ask us. You can open your mic and ask directly Coach Dave, or you can write here in the chat. You can, even if you have some difficulty, you can write it privately to me, or you can write it in Arabic and we will translate it to Coach Dave.
Yes, Mr. Dave, I have question. That's
Sure.
okay. As passing many exams could send a negative signal for company, I mean, that might mean the worker or the student is not social, for example.
Can you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
As passing many exams could send a negative signal for companies, that mean the worker is not social, for example, or something like that.
So you talked about a signal to companies that are hiring.
Yeah.
He's saying that if the hiring company saw you that you're passing too many exams during your study in university, is that might be a signal that you don't have any social life or you are not very active.
Gotcha. Okay. My apologies. I'm not sure if it's a signal of not having a social life. What it does sometimes put some companies in a predicament. And that predicament is they've got a schedule of how much they pay in salaries for new employees. And usually that pay scale will be like 2 or 3 or maybe 4 exams. But if you have 5 exams, then you're on a schedule where they're supposed to pay you more, but they don't want to pay you more because you don't have the experience. And so they're in a predicament where they're not quite sure what that salary should be. And sometimes there'll be other people in the company that have worked longer that may not have passed as many exams, but they're currently worth more to the company because of their experience, but they would be getting paid less. And so I think that that's the biggest challenge that they have is that, they like people passing exams, but they have a system that they've created for paying salaries, and it works better if people are in that 2 to 3 to 4 exams passed and don't have any real experience. Then they've got a salary that they will fits for that level. But if you got more than that, then it becomes a challenge for them how to do that. So I think that's the biggest challenge that they have. I don't think they look at it as you're not a social person and you can't do other things and that you spend all your time studying. I just think it puts them in a difficult position when it comes to figuring out your salary.
Okay.
I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. I wish that wasn't, because to me, I encourage people to pass exams. I wish that wasn't the case, but I think that is the reality.
Yeah, thank you. I have another question.
Sure, please.
What's the story of coaching actuary? I mean, how was it started at the first place?
Yeah, so I started in 1995, and the reason why I started it was because I worked for an insurance company that I really liked, and I talked about the mergers that went on. Our company merged with a bigger company, and then the two companies became a much bigger company. And I just got my FSA at that time. And so they were wanting me to do things that I didn't really want to do. And they were all good things. They wanted me to manage people, manage projects and whatever. I enjoyed doing more technical work. And the culture of the company really was not the culture that it was before the merger. And I enjoyed a smaller company better. I didn't enjoy working for a larger company as well. And so I realized that this was not a good place for me to continue to work. And so I thought about, well, I could go to another place, but I always kind of wanted to start my own company. So I figured, well, now is as good a time as any to try that. Now I look back on it and I think I may have been it was a pretty big risk, quite honestly. But sometimes when you're young, you don't necessarily know how risky that was. But fortunately, it ended up working out for me. But that's why I kind of started the company, was I really wanted to work with developing actuarial technology and use the computer to build models. I loved building models. And so those are the things I wanted to do rather than managing people and managing projects.
Thank you very much, Mr.
You're welcome. That's a good question. So, part of that I think is for you is to learn what you enjoy doing. What are things that you want to do in your career? And you may not need to know that for your first job, but as you work on your second and third job, when you're looking at your final job, you want to have a good idea as to what you do. And just because other people like to do things, don't think that that's what you'd like to do. And don't be afraid to do something different based upon what you prefer, because being an actuary, I think, is a great career, but if you're not doing what you enjoy, then you're not going to be a really good at it, and you're not going to enjoy it. And so I didn't necessarily enjoy every of my first couple of jobs, but I did well in those jobs. So then I could find a job that I did enjoy.
I have another question, Coach.
Sure.
Dave. We all know how much the professional designations are respected in the market. But I want to know from a recruiter's perspective, what's the difference between having a CFA and being a fellow in investment?
So the CFA, like the Chartered Financial Analyst?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. I know a little bit about that because we provide study materials for the CFA, and both of them are, highly, respected. Then with CFA, obviously, is more geared toward the asset side of the balance sheet, where actuaries are liabilities and assets, and so they're more well-rounded. The actual exams are extremely technical and detailed, whereas the CFA are not nearly as technical. You would spend probably one day studying for exam FM, and you would know almost everything you need to know for interest theory for the CFA. It took me 2 years to understand FM, and I probably could have done it in 2 days on the CFA. And that's just because the CFA covers a lot of material in a short amount of time, but they don't go into much detail. But with that, it is a highly respected credential, especially if you're into banking and finance. And so if you really want to go deep, then I think the actuarial field is good. If you want to not go as technical and you want to go faster, then you can maybe look at the CFA credential. So both are very good. One of the things about the actuaries that I learned when I worked at insurance companies was the actuaries are uniquely trained to understand the liabilities of a company. And no one else in the company understands the liabilities like the actuaries do. And so it's a very unique skill set, very detailed because the liabilities are complicated. And so that is something that only the actuaries can understand. And I learned that really quickly when I worked for insurance companies. People had worked there 30 years and they did not understand the products that the company was selling. They understood, some basics of it, but they didn't understand how the products worked and how it made money and what were the risks of the products. All those things that actuaries are trained to do. People that work for companies may work there 30 years and do not understand that, but you might learn that in your first 3 months of a job. And so that is a unique skill set that actuaries have.
We reached almost an hour. I'm not sure if anyone else have any question.
I have a question, please.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Coach Dave, you said that you took the FSA in 8 years, right?
Yes.
Okay, how did you manage between the studying and having fun and spending time with the family and friends?
Right. That's a great question because at that time I was married and had kids, and I
Have
had,
kids almost.
yeah, I think I had 4 kids by the time I got my ASA. And
Oh,
and so I was, I learned, but what I learned was I learned how to discipline myself to study. And so I didn't have as much time as maybe other people who didn't have families or children. And so that forced me to be more disciplined and to study smarter. And in the long run, I benefited from that. And so I think the balance is to learn how to study more efficient and to be more focused. You can do that. That is something that you can do if you focus on doing that. And don't think that you just need to spend more time. Think about spending more quality time. That's a good question, Ahmed.
Thank you.
So again, I'll be on LinkedIn. So, if you didn't get your question asked, don't hesitate to ask me questions on LinkedIn. I'd be more than happy to answer them. I wish I could talk more, but that I know we're limited on time.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, great.
One last question, please.
Sure.
Okay, yeah.
Coach Dave, are you planning to create some special courses beside the actuarial courses that may benefit an employee as an actuary as an employee rather than a student?
Well, we're always looking at that, but right now we are quite busy with the exam system, and we wish we were done with the predictive analytics, and we wish we were done with Mass 2. And so until we get those products done, we're probably not going to be looking at other options. But we have talked about in our 3 to 5 year plan some possibilities, but right now that's too far out to be certain of much. But it is something where we want to give more to actuaries to help them prepare them for their career. We're just not sure what more is yet.
So, Muhammad.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think with that, we have reached to the end of our meeting today. It was a pleasure and an honor to speak to Coach Dave Kester from Coaching Actuaries. I would like to thank you very much, Coach K, for the rich presentation and for your contribution to make this event successful. I would like to thank everyone in the audience for coming and participating. Also, special thanks to the Actuarial Science Club members who are working behind the scene and preparing these events. So if you would like to contact us at any time, please refer to our account on Twitter, KFUPMASC. And with that, I would like to say thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Yep. And I want to thank everyone. And I did happen to think about, I talked about the having access to our predictive analytics. I do ask that you don't tell people outside of your club about that, because I just want that to be just something that is for your club, but not everyone worldwide. And so I guess that's kind of a confidential thing. I'd be more than happy to work with you, but try to limit it to your club.
Yeah, sure.
That's true.
Sure, no issue. Thank you very much again.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you a lot.
Have a good day. Bye.